All right, picking up from yesterday, we were talking about police ethics and the dangers of police work. Today, we're going to take a look more at the ethical part, starting with the idea of racial profiling, which, of course, is always in the news. As you've learned from the Trayvon Martin case, once you hit race, that's a hot button topic for the media, and they're all over it. And they will make a story if police are caught. A lot of the times, that's a bigger issue than even the ethics of whether they should profile or not. So with that said, do police profile people? And as we've learned in class before, yes, they do. They do profile people based on location. Remember, we talked about drug dealers driving up I-95 strip. So if people from Florida get tagged, males get tagged, young teenagers to early 20s get tagged more. People of color get tagged more. Men, obviously. So there's a variety of different things that the police will look for when it comes to profiling a suspect. Now, please keep in mind, and this is where the media gets it wrong and most public gets it wrong, it is not illegal for them to profile people. Police will call that good police work. They're going to look at somebody from Florida on the I-95 corridor. Some people go, well, they're just watching out for people from Florida. Well, yeah, they are, because that's where your higher percentage of drug deals, the people that are carrying illegal narcotics are going to come up. 95 is from Florida. They're going to look for multiple males. So yes, they're going to look for younger guys. Those are all things that they target. That's called good police work. Now, here's the difference that you have to take notice of, and that's in that third paragraph. You cannot be stopped based on profiling. You have to have some kind of other illegal activity, and that's where speeding comes in. That's where if your car is tinted, that can come in, or the muffler's been changed, that can come in. So you're making yourself a target, and generally that's guys again, but you're making yourself a target by the police because you have modified your vehicle in some way, or you're speeding, or you're doing something else. Not to say that the police probably could not find a way to stop almost anybody anytime, but to do it legally, it cannot be just due to race. So profiling, yes, does occur by police. Police will tell you that's good investigative skills. But again, when it comes to the court of law and standing before a judge, they better have a good reason why they made the stop, either a traffic stop or a person stop or whatever it may be, why they're looking at particular suspects, etc. That's not race, gender, age related. Now, that's more of your ethical, and we'll talk a little bit more about ethical in a minute. But let's take a minute to look at, downright corruption. Does corruption happen in the police force? And again, like I've told you before, any profession, you're going to have people that do things that they probably shouldn't, that are illegal, and it gives a bad reputation for everybody else. And unfortunately, the police department is not any different. In the 70s, it was very well known that police, especially in major cities, New York was one of the biggest, that took bribes. And that's why crime was so rampant, because police would turn a blind eye to many drug dealers and gangsters and different things because they were being paid off. And the police department was very corrupt. And as a matter of fact, if you look here, the name Frank Serpico, he was actually distrusted by his fellow policemen because he wouldn't take money. So an honest policeman wasn't trustworthy. Hey, what's the irony in that? He ended up testifying. He's one of the first people that really brought this to the forefront of police corruption. Bribery is taking money for favors, doing things, again, payoffs. Police demanding that they get payment for watching out, protecting businesses or people or whatever it may be. You have shakedowns. Mooching is actually one that's very debated amongst policemen. Mooching is offered by businesses to give their service freely to the police. So the policemen aren't asking for it. It's not a shakedown. But they're offering it. Wawa, for example, offers free coffee. Redner's offers a discount on their groceries. Dunkin' Donuts, I believe, offers coffee, maybe some donuts as well, while officers are all on duty. Now, here's a issue that came up a couple years ago. So they offer it for while officers are on duty, and it's a good business reason. It's practical. Why? Because the more police are in your business, the less likely it is to get robbed. Remember, police are there, so the bad guys aren't. So in this case, they're perfectly allowed to do that. Officers are perfectly allowed, and some officers were coming in while they were off duty and wanting to get coffee and donuts, and the businesses didn't want to do that because they weren't in uniform, so it didn't look like they were policemen. So then businesses were having a problem, and then they had to make a rule where it had to be uniformed policemen, and it got all twisted there. But mooching is done by businesses. Now, some officers won't take anything for free because they would feel beholden to their Dunkin' Donut or their Wawa. So some won't do it at all. But there's nothing illegal about it. That becomes more of a moral corruption, ethical issue. Internal corruption, officers bending the rules for others in their person in the department. That can happen. I've talked to Officer Valdez about that, where officers will overlook a fellow officer's DUI, or now not to the point where they've had an accident or they've hurt someone, but maybe stopping an officer who's driving under the influence, and we call in, have somebody else drive them home. Different things like that. That's still illegal, should not be done. But they do what they call protect the shield. Selective enforcement, the power of personal benefits or civil rights for officers, and then sometimes you get downright just criminal behavior by police officers, and that certainly can happen. Like I said, 70s and 80s. Early 80s, when crime was rampant in the United States, a big reason for that was because the police were so corrupted. Today, there's always been accountability, some better than others. In the local police department, and maybe the sheriff. Remember, the sheriff doesn't exactly work for the police. The sheriff is elected, so the sheriff may be seen as unbiased and may come in and check for any officer misconduct in a situation or anything that's thought to be illegal. In your bigger cities, you have the IAU, also known as the Internal Affairs Unit, and they would do the investigating. Obviously, officers are not very happy with the IAU investigating them. Unfortunately, we didn't get to watch the CSI episode with a policeman shooting, and of course, the IAU has to come in and investigate, and you can see how the policemen kind of circle the wagons there. We also see the IAU in a police brutality case that we didn't get to see either. But in that case, the officers were accused of abusing a suspect, and again, they have to be protected. Now, in this case, they're protected by their police brethren, the thing, but they're being investigated, of course, again by the IAU, or the Internal Affairs Unit. So, like I said, for police officers, almost on a daily basis, they have different ethical dilemmas that they can run into. What is the correct course of action in a certain case? Remember in the beginning of the semester, many of you wanted to drive through a park to get the bad guy. Unfortunately, there might be people in the park, and I said, you really can't do that. That's an ethical question. That you can't hurt people to get the bad guy. You let the bad guy go in that situation. How far do I pursue? How do I know how much a witness knows? Of course, television always gets the correct amount, and the witness always confesses. But in truth, that doesn't always happen. So the police have to be able to be aware of how far what a witness knows, how far they can go, what's illegal, what's not illegal. Ethical actions, planning evidence, or flip-flopping. Remember, we had the Law and Order case where the Lenny character decides to reevaluate the crime scene. And most of you said, yeah, you would probably do that to get the bad guy, while others won't. It's a totally individual decision. Unlawful stops. When do you stop? When do you want to give this person a hard time because they're just being a jerk? When do you want to push it? Are you, you ask a teenager and they don't know that they shouldn't be searched. Do you push that? Those are all ethical questions. Police have to be challenged with all the time, and we expect them to always know the right thing. They get trained with that. of knowing the right decision, going out with racial bias. What if you are a racist person? Don't you think there's racist police officers? There are. And the whole point is you need to check that racism as you put that uniform on, as Officer Valdez has told you before in class. There's no need for that, and there's no point for that when it comes to serving in the police department. So some of the fundamental elements of the police ethic: discretion. Remember, we've talked a lot about discretion. When to use rules, when to enforce rules, when to lay back, when to give somebody a break. Those kind of ideas, and again, most officers are honest, and that's why the courts allow them a lot of leeway when it comes to their discretion. As far as duty, heat of the moment situations, walking into that child abuser, really wanting to jack that guy up. How do you know when you can't do something? That's always important situations, and police officers get trained with that all the time. Honesty, again, a lot of this depends on the officer's honesty. We expect them to be honest. We expect officers not to break the law, bend the law. They do, and I can tell you that. I can tell you the officers that have told me that. But for the most part, do they do an honest job? Do they get the bad guy when they're supposed to? Do they let them walk when they're supposed to? And then finally, loyalty. Officers have to decide what extent do they go to defend their fellow officers. Do you look the other way? There's a great ethical, and I'll leave you with this, there's a great ethical dilemma in the movie The Town, where a police officer gets a call that there's 4 bank robbers heavily armed, and he looks over and he sees the car, and he sees the bank robbers get out, and they all have machine guns. And the question becomes, do you look away and drive away? Do you, if you stop these guys, you're going to die. You're not going to go home and see your family today. Do you drive down the street and radio it in? I honestly can't answer that one. A lot of the guys will go down in a blaze of glory. When you have a wife and 2 kids at home and they're depending on you, that's a tough one. Do you look the other way? It's a great question, and again, a lot we put on police officers every day to always make the right decision. So remember that when you read an article or see the news and everybody's lambasting that police officer for making a bad decision, try to put yourself in their shoes. Would you have made the right one? There's plenty of times I have, and I put myself in their shoes, and I have no idea what I would do. Probably look like a deer in headlights, and I would probably not make it through the day. So those are all, like I said, ethical questions and dilemmas the police officers have to face. Fortunately, I would say out of the 600,000, 590,000 are making good decisions every day, making the right decisions. Are there a few that make bad decisions? Yes. And unfortunately, that's with everything. But understand the difficulties. So this is going to conclude our police portion of criminal justice. Starting next week, we're going into the courtroom. We're going to learn all about all the people in the courtroom, and then we're going to go through the criminal trial procedure in a lot of detail. So until then, enjoy your week. Make sure your homework due on Friday. Have a good week. Have a good week, guys.